I'm literally swimming in carts full of parts, all for a coolant leak.
You're so poetic, dear.
Yeah, parts full of carts. And there's more parts on carts that you're not seeing here. They're on the other side of the vehicle. There's 2 or 3 more carts. All this, we talked about 3 to 4 grand before. We're going to be at 4, possibly more, because we found more things wrong. As usual, you find more things when you get it apart. But 4 grand range, and all of these parts. This looks like a salvage yard, guys. It looks like a pick-apart because of this. This is it. Just this. So now we're continuing the series of My What's Broken? It's 4 grand? What? Why? These videos exist for you guys out there. Not the gearheads. You guys know what a head gasket's involved. It's going to be expensive. But this is for every other 90 million people out there that don't even know what a head gasket is. But even if you're a gearhead, there's some things I'm going to show you today, especially if you have one of these engines. You definitely want to watch towards the end. There is some information for you that is very imperative for you. We're going to show you guys some things. If you have a SkyActiv 2.5, I found some things on the cylinder head you guys are definitely going to want to see. We're going to show some changes in technology and just take a look at the carnage. There is so many pieces here. It's like I've mentioned many times, walking in on a loved one during open heart surgery. You would literally gasp and possibly pass out and go unconscious from seeing the sight. Back in the day on Grandpa's Chevy 350, which I always keep bringing up all the time because I did enjoy working on those back in the day, we could do both head gaskets and only fill 1 cart full of parts. It really wouldn't be that big of a deal. It would be time consuming, but the parts involved would literally just fill this 1 cart. I know because I've done them before. My have times changed. This is insane. We're going to do the famous, just wait, there's more. You guys love it when I do those. And for those of you who say, oh, this is another one of those whining and crying videos, going through how much it takes to do a job. There's other videos you can go watch if you don't like this one. But if you're into carnage, you're going to love what we're going to go through. Let's go ahead and start at the first cart, which is way over there. So I told you I have a lot of these carts. Me and Mrs. Wizard got them at a school auction, type of a purple wave sale. We got them for like $5 a piece, and they have paid for themselves in dividends. They are very useful. They're the old TV carts that you guys remember if you're our age or older, when they would wheel in the cart with a television and a VCR on it in school. That's basically what these are. So let's start up here. We have a heat shield, some serpentine belts, a valve cover, a dipstick, some nuts and bolts. Down to the next level, we have a position sensor, AC compressor. Here's the ECM, some hoses and bolts, and an engine mount. Down below we have some new parts. There's some gaskets, our head gasket, and some other things that just arrived today. Before we move on, I wanted to show you the ECM. This is the brains of your engine. It's just this little black box. And it has connectors that hook into here with tons and tons of wires. So when you start your engine, everything that's controlling fuel and timing and all these things going on is all inside this little black box. So when they say your computer's gone out, they don't mean your computer on your desktop with a keyboard and a mouse. This is the computer, the main computer for the whole engine and the transmission. But wait, there's more. In order to get behind the engine and get to all the exhaust bolts and things that are going on, you had to remove the windshield cowling. This is our actual wiper linkage, basically the wiper transmission that has the motor, the linkages, everything that runs the windshield wipers. There's some various nuts and bolts. Here's the actual wipers themselves, and here's some little cover that goes over the transmission to keep water and things off of it. Down to level 2. There's the actual cowling itself. I'll remove it and show some of it. This is the windshield cowling. This actually covers the windshield wiper linkages and everything right below your windshield. And down here at level 3 we have the bottom section of the windshield cowling. These take a little bit of time to take off. They don't take tons of time, but by taking the cowling off, it cuts tons of time on the back side of the engine. We'll take a look inside the bay here in a minute and you can see what I mean. But wait, there's more. Here's a smaller table he was using to kind of lay out some of the turbo and various other parts. Here's some heat shields, some nuts and bolts, clamps, brackets. Here's the actual turbo, which it has kind of a little changeover we can show you that changes low speed, high speed, and different things going on. There's some hoses, a charge air pipe, fuel line. This is our high pressure fuel pump that's run off of the camshaft. This actually provides the high pressure for the injectors. That's actually a vacuum pump for the brake booster. So this is a lot of parts that came off the back side of the engine. Once he removed the cowling and things that we just saw on cart number 2, he was able to start pulling these parts off a lot easier. He didn't have to fight and figure out tricks and tips and different ways to get it out of there. He just was able to just lift it out. And he being Magic Mike. Magic Mike did all of this work. So, but wait, there's always more. Here we are at cart number 4. We're still not done. We have 2 more to go after this. On level 1, we have a little coolant elbow, a little air induction pipe. There's some brackets. This is a battery bracket. Here's a charge air pipe. Here's some ignition coils in the spark plugs, which are tiny little 14mm spark plugs. Here's some changeover valves and things that operate the turbo, some vacuum lines and whatnot. Down at level 2, we see the throttle body, which is right here. We see a little heat shield. Over here we have the EGR cooler. Here we have the actual intake manifold. I'll go ahead and pull these out for you to see. So here is our intake manifold. You can see there, a plastic intake. Here's our high pressure fuel rail. You can see at the end is actual high pressure sensor for the fuel system. And down to level 3, we have the battery box, which is right there. Here's our air filter box with the airflow sensor on it. There's an under tray and a heat shield. And here is our battery insulation, kind of a little box that goes around the battery. In the front of this cart is actually another under shield that goes on the bottom. You can see it's coated in coolant because it was leaking pretty bad. So the argument could be made, all this stuff didn't need to come off to get the head off. Possibly. But we are going to be sending the head to a machine shop to verify flatness, and also if it needs to be skimmed in case it's a little bit warped. I don't know if it's been overheated, but I'm not going to gamble and say, I hope it hasn't been, let's just throw it back together. I'm going to have a professional machinist check that, and if it needs to be reskimmed, we're going to do that. One of the requirements that most machine shops, especially mine, has is the cylinder head cannot have all of this connected to it. It physically won't even fit in his machine with all of this stuff on it. So yes, it does have to come off. But wait, we're not done. There's more. Here we are at cart number 5. We still have another one to go. Up here we have the lower oil pan, or the actual oil pan. We needed to take it loose to get to the oil pump chain, which is part of the timing chain system. We have a serpentine belt tensioner and the alternator sitting there. Here we have the actual timing cover, which covers up the timing chain and its bolts that hold it on. Here is our harmonic balancer. Here's some little oil feed lines. Here's our old timing chain, the old tensioner, the guides, which is these parts here are the ones I mentioned. We will not be putting the old ones back on. These are going to go in the trash. Now we'll move to level 2. You can see we have one of the cams and its caps, the cam caps. We have a VVT solenoid, Some of the head bolts, which will not be reused. Those are going in the scrap pile. We got new head bolts. That exhaust manifold I'm going to use for demonstration. It does not go to this car. It goes to a Ferrari 456. We'll use that here in a minute. Show you that. The exhaust cam did not need to be removed to remove the head. We just had to remove the intake cam to get the head bolts out. So that's it for cart number 5. And just wait. There's more. Here we are at the final cart. And it doesn't end at cart number 6. Just to let you know. Here's the cylinder head. We have a little heat shield, actually exhaust gasket. We have some lifters, and this is the little changeover valve for the turbo I talked about. And our head gasket. Let me show you on the head gasket where it blew. In this area around the block is where the coolant flows. And there should be a nice black coating that seals, but you can see that black coating has been eaten away and coolant was coming out. Not into the cylinders. The cylinders were dry. It was leaking externally through these areas where you can see it's blown. We're going to come back to the cylinder head here in a little bit, but I want to finish up the parts. In order to get the exhaust off and out of the car, in order to get the head off, we had to take even more parts off. Let's go take a look. Not even Mrs. Wizard has a school table big enough to fit these parts. In order to get the catalytic converter and things out the bottom, the drive shaft is in the way, and several other things are in the way. In order to get the drive shaft out, you have to get the entire exhaust system out and the little underbelly tray there. All of this stuff, and all of the stuff, all the cart parts we just saw, carts full of parts, I should say. Everything that you just saw was just for this, a $40 head gasket. These engines are not very good as far as teardown. They are very extensive. There's so many things bolted on top of one another and more parts bolted on top of another. In order to get to this has to come off. In order to get to that has to come off. And it just keeps going and going. And as you can see, Magic Mike throughout the day was filling. He said, I got to go get another cart. And he'd fill that one up and say, oh my goodness, I have to go get a third cart and a fourth and a fifth. And it just kept going. Now we know why this is a 17-hour job and why this is going to cost $4,000 or possibly more. Now that I've shown you all the parts, it's time to show kind of some educational things, technological upgrades that manufacturers have done. And one thing you definitely need to watch for if you're going to be doing a 2.5 Sky Active engine. So this is basically a Ford engine. They did some changes here or there with the timing chain system. It doesn't use the same timing tools as a Ford 2.5. But there's been a lot of changes in a lot of cars. It doesn't just apply to Mazda. This has been various other cars. We all know on most cars we have an exhaust manifold. These flanges bolt to the head, and then down here it goes to either an exhaust pipe or a turbo or whatever else you want to do, or catalytic converter. But you had a physical exhaust manifold that could be removed from the vehicle. Again, this is off of a Ferrari 456. I'm just using it as an example. Here on the cylinder head, we see there is no exhaust manifold. The manifold is physically built into the head. It is aluminum. Take a look. See these ports? It looks like a manifold, the way it's shaped. It all comes together to a flange. The exhaust manifold is part of the head. So the idea is, say, oh, I'm going to get some headers and get some more flow. No, you're not. Not on these new engines. They don't even use headers. They don't even use exhaust manifolds anymore. But they do flow pretty good anyways. While we're here, I wanted to show you something on the 2.5s that it can be a problem, and it was a problem with this one. Although our head gasket was blown, we do see where the coolant was coming out. We did see with the borescope camera it physically coming out of the head gasket. We know this was leaking. But once we got it apart, there's some area that you can't see. This is where the turbo hooks up. There is this gasket that goes here. Then there is this changeover valve that goes here, just like so. There are 5 freeze plugs. They're threaded. They're not really a freeze plug. They're just coolant plugs. You can't see them. You don't even know that they're there. And the only way that you can change them out or even get to them is really to pull the head. But while we had this apart, Magic Mike pulled this part off. Then he pulled off this exhaust gasket. And right here is a threaded plug. It wasn't dripping, but it just had a little bit of coolant around the outside. Same over here. And same on these 3. So additional to the head gasket being blown, these were also compromised, a little seal around there. They were just a little bit wet. Again, they weren't dripping, but they could be over time. Here's a picture of with the threaded plugs removed and what the little threaded plugs look like. They have a chamfered head which seals, but there was no sealant on the threads. These are probably just casting holes used whenever they made this head, when they put the melted aluminum into a casting. They close off those holes with threaded plugs. Over time, they could leak really bad. Can you imagine? We just did this head gasket job. We solved the head gasket leak, and 3 months later it comes back. Now these plugs have gotten worse to where now they're dripping all over the ground. An amount of tear down that you would have to get to just to get to those. So if you have a SkyActiv 2.5 Mazda engine and you have the head off for any kind of work, you should just go ahead and reseal those with Teflon tape and everything and clean up the chamfers and make sure it seals nice and tight. You could have to redo this all over again for thousands more dollars. It only costs pennies to do Teflon tape and to clean the chamfers up, and it takes care of that problem. So there's coating, like I showed you, it's a black layer of coating, and for whatever reason the coating gave way. It's just enough for coolant to drip out. The thickness here, where this coating is thicker than where the coating was blown out. And that gives just a thousandth or two, maybe 3 or 4 thousandth of an inch of a gap where coolant can just trickle out, pour out. And imagine under 15, 20 psi of pressure in that range. It'll literally just spray out. Also, so you guys with the SkyActiv 2.5 should know, we called the dealer. I called actually several parts suppliers and showed them pictures that you just saw, and they were like, I never even knew that those were there. I don't know, we don't have those parts. We called the Mazda dealer, and they said, we don't have, and never has there been, replacements for those plugs. You can't buy them, and you never could even from the get-go. There are none. If those need to be replaced, we will be happy to sell you a whole new cylinder head. But is getting these little plugs by themselves? Non-existent. At least that's what the dealership tells me. You might be able to go to a pick apart or a salvage yard and get these little plugs. Maybe you could have a machine shop make new ones for you if they were to get corroded. Luckily, these were serviceable. We cleaned up the threads and put Teflon tape, and they're going to seal really nice.
You look so small down there.
Well, it's probably because you're standing on a stool. How about that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So here's the engine being held up by a jack stand because we have to kind of maneuver it around to get parts out. But look at all these wires and hoses and things just to get the head off. One thing I found really strange is if you look down in this coolant channel, there's a plastic liner. It's like a black plastic thing that goes all the way inside of the coolant channel there. I don't know what that's for. I don't know what it does. Maybe you guys in the comments can let me know what that is. Maybe some of you have engineered this engine. I don't know. I thought that was very, very odd. There's nothing wrong with that as far as being damaged or anything like that. I just think it's really weird. I've never seen that before. It's strange. But imagine putting this all back together again. New timing chains, new head bolts, new belts, new O-rings, all kind of things. This is a very, very labor-intensive job. I definitely wanted to show you guys. We were going to do a 5-minute video or kind of an update. After I seen all this, I knew this would be a full video for you guys. Phase 2 of the Mazda CX-9. So now we kind of get an idea why the local shop in town, which is a very good shop, is a reputable shop. I'm not going to mention names. I don't need to get into legal mumbo jumbo. But they really are a good shop. But when they found out what was going on with this car, the owner of that shop said, oh, hell no. I'm not doing this. You're going to have to take it to Omega or take it somewhere else or to the dealer. We don't even have interest in this job. It's another plus of having such a large shop. I had friends and family members when I started this shop tell me, "You're an idiot. You'll never fill up this shop. Only a moron would buy such a place this big. No mechanic shop is that big, Car Wizard." And they're eating crow even to this day. Some of them actually don't talk to me anymore because they're like, "Wow, it really did work." Yeah. But because the shop is so big, we're able to have a car sit on the lift for 2 weeks. While we're waiting on parts, we get things apart and find out there was more wrong than we thought they were, and now this is stalled. We don't have large flows of cars needed to come and go in 1 or 2 days' time. It can sit. We're happy to take on these big, larger jobs. In fact, that's kind of what we specialize anymore. We also have space for all the carts. This right here, what you just saw, would piss off a shop owner of a smaller shop. It has 2 or 3 bays. They've got a 2 or 3 week backlog of cars coming in. This would really be making a shop owner pull their hair out. They'd be like, "Oh my God, I should not have taken on this job. This is way over our heads." But here, this is definitely the type of thing that we do. Magic Mike did tell us, be careful with the carts. He has everything in order, some of the bolts that go to corresponding pieces and parts. He didn't want them all knocked around and mixed up. So we definitely were slow with moving the carts and everything. So now you know when somebody says, "My head gasket's blown" on a newer car, 2016 newer car, now you can sympathize with them and say, "I saw the Car Wizard's video on the head gaskets on newer cars, and bro, that's deep. Whoa. I'm glad that that's not my car." Now you know why, and not why it's so expensive and what's all involved. If you're curious what kind of tools that we used or Magic Mike used to get this deep into this car, check our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut and really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button because there's many more in this series of My What's Broken coming. Let me swim out of here all these parts. Thanks for watching.